What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rick Mast Show. I am Charlie Marlow. That is the great Rick Mast. We're back now. Rick gave his opinion last week on Stewart Haas racing. I was on vacation, but Rick, how are you? And we're back for our traditional show here this week.
Man, I'm great. If I was any better, Charlie, I don't know what I would do. You know, uh, it's kind of like when I was racing and we had a good weekend, and you live that weekend all week long, man, all week long. You're just on a high, a natural high.
I love it because look, this last race in St. Louis, which is kind of a fun debate around here, because some people get mad when you call it St. Louis because it's actually in Madison, Illinois. So there's some Illinois people that's, oh, it's not St. Louis, but it's it's close to the big city of St. Louis. It was a fun race. It was a nice, efficient, about 3 hour race. The weather was really good, which was not the case the year prior. So, what'd you think of St. Louis, or people still call it Gateway, even though the name has changed?
Yeah, it's gateways. What I think. Like, what do we have? Some of the racetrack. Harrisburg. You ever heard of Harrisburg? That's Charlotte Motor Speedway. It's actually in Harrisburg. People used to get mad about that.
Uh huh.
And let's see, Chicago. That was Joliet or
Yeah.
Joliet, right? And people get upset about that. But I bet Kitty Wallace the only one gets upset. No, he doesn't get upset. No, no, no. But anyhow, the race, it was great, wasn't it? It's like I always tell people, Gateway or St. Louis or whatever you call it now. It's like to me, it's a big Martinsville. Two long straightaways and two short turns, right? And it made for some. They had good racing, man. It was good racing. You look at that deal. I mean, the big takeaway, of course, is Blaney running out of fuel, and we haven't heard anything yet about why that happened. I mean, obviously, it was a miscalculation on somebody's part. Either the can wasn't full, they didn't get it full, they miscommunicated on the numbers. Whatever happened, I know one thing: it cost that boy a race. But and then somebody said, and I missed this, but somebody said that Mike Joy, or whoever made the was it Mike Joy? Is he still doing it? Yeah,
Hmm.
made the reference to the Rick Mast Harry Gant helping Harry the last lap at Talladega, bumping out of gas story, right? And they said that I missed it. They said he made reference to that deal. I guess when the last lap and they was trying to help Blaney or whatever. But anyhow, man, that was so discouraging for Blaney. Golly, it was discouraging. I was happy for the Cindric guy. You know what I mean? I mean, his daddy, Tim basically runs Penske Racing, I guess you might say, in a way. And good, very good people. They're all very good people. And Cindric's his daddy's a good dude, and he's a good dude, and so it's a feel good thing for that bunch.
For sure. Okay, so I got to the track super early because Kenny Wallace did his live show at 9:30 in the morning. So I got there early, stayed about 3 hours, actually left, came back, hung out with my family for a few hours, and then went back right after the start of the race. And just to be totally clear, I actually left about 30 with about 30 laps to go. So I listened to the final 30 laps on the radio, which was fun to listen to. But before I get back to that, you got to tell me. So I wasn't watching the TV broadcast when Blaney ran out of gas. So tell me about this Harry Gant story with you, because I have not heard that one yet.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
man, dude, this was 90. Gosh, it's my first year of school, which would have been 91. Bob Johnson was my crew chief. We were running the car. We actually had a good car that day, and we got mixed up. I think it was a race when Kyle Petty broke his leg, I believe, on the backstretch. I got mixed up in that wreck, and it screwed up the front of the nose of my car. So we'd come down pit road, and my crew was trying to fix the nose, right, and get it patched back together. Well, we're on pit road, and they we didn't get back out in time to catch a pack. So when I go back out, I'm all by myself, and we run all day. Kind of, it seems like that. But anyhow, I come up. Harry's leading the race. He's leading the race towards the end of the race. They're running me down and Harry comes up to me to lap me. Okay, and we're running together, and they come on the radio and tell me, Rick, Harry is leading and he hadn't pitted and it's going to be close on gas. Would you get behind him just in case? Right. So I get behind him The race ends. Harry wins the race. We pull into the garage area, and I'm down here talking to all the reporters. I got as many reporters in my garage as Harry's got in Victor Lane, right? And I'm sitting here telling them that I did not help Harry. I may have bumped him a couple times, but I didn't, I didn't actually help him and all that. Basically lying my ass off. And then there's Harry up on Victor Lane on CBS TV saying, I don't know if Rick hadn't been there to help me. I wouldn't have got this if Rick hadn't been there to help me. Well, so what happens, Charlie? We get called to the red truck, right? Everybody knows. So I didn't know what the red truck means. So I go in the red truck. There sits Darrell. Okay, Darrell finishes second to Harry. Darrell Waltrip. Dick Beatty's in there. He's like their competition director at the time. I think Mr. France Jr. was in there. 3 or 4 NASCAR people, and my team owner Richard Jackson would go in there. But Darrell's he's battered a wet hen, man, just raising holy hell. You can't do that. You can't push Rick. You pushed him on the last lap, and you can't do that. Darrell, Harry's got to be disqualified, and on and on and on. And they're asking me, and all I'm doing is saying, watch the TV cameras, guys. Just watch the TV cameras. That's all I can tell you. Watch the TV cameras, because I kind of figured out at the time that I don't think that they really got good shots of what we were doing, even though the cameras had to be on us. But anyhow, that's another whole long story about camera placement and drivers knowing where the cameras are and all in those days. All right. But anyhow, so we're sitting there and Darrell, I mean, again, but Darrell's just trying to get it going, trying to get Harry disqualified. I'm not admitting to anything. About that time, there's a knock on the door, and they open. It's Jeff Hammond. Right. Jeff is Darrell's crew chief.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jeff says, Darrell, I need to see you out here. Darrell says, what? He says, we got a problem. I need to see you. He said, I'm busy right now. He says, yeah, I know, Darrell, but we've got a problem. I need to talk to you out here. Talk to me in here if you want to talk to me. Our car is in inspection, and our spoiler's too low. All right. So we have minimum degree on the rear spoilers. That's a rule. And what would happen during the race, the guys that weren't cheating, that had little hydraulic devices and all that would lower the angle of the spoiler. If you lower the spoiler at Talladega or Daytona, you're going to go faster, dude. But I mean, it's like 100 horsepower, lower that spoiler 2 or 3 degrees. So what would happen, the guys would come in the pit, and they would, like the gas catch can man or whoever, or either the guy running around with the tire, they would come around and just kind of whack that spoiler, right? Just whack it. And you didn't have 1,000 cameras zoomed in on every pit stop in those days, and you only had so many officials to watch this stuff. So during the race, at some point, one of the pit crew of Darrell's dudes, one of his guys, hit the spoiler and knocked it down, right, to make it faster. Not something that wasn't unheard of. People would do that. You just try to get away with it. Well, anyhow, he said our spoiler's too low. And we beats too well. It's an inspection, Darrell, and the spoiler's low. And I will sit down here to talk to y'all in the red truck. Darrell sits there for, I'm going to say, a good 7 or 8 seconds. Dead silence. Didn't say a word. Finally, he stands up. He looks at everybody and grins and says, oh, Harry's a hell of a driver, ain't he? I'll see y'all next week. And walks out the door, right? Because what was going to happen, if they disqualified Harry, they were going to have to disqualify Darrell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Darrell knew that. And really, Earnhardt, who should have won this friggin' race, he finished third, right? He's the one who should have won the race. But a funny part of that deal, it was so many funny parts of that. I mean, like the next week we go where we're at, and Harry stops me. He said, Rick, did you have to lie as much as I did all week about you pushing me? I said, no, I didn't lie anymore. I said, when I was down there lying to those reporters, you were up there on national television saying I couldn't have made it without old Rick Bass had to help me. Yeah, but I didn't know it was illegal. I didn't know you couldn't do that. I'm like, well, whatever, And a follow-up to that story, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, I did a clip on Twitter, or X now, and it's from the movie Cars. And Darrell's doing the narration on Cars, right? And they're at a race somewhere, and somebody runs out of fuel. I forget the names of these car deals. You can look it up and find it. But he's pushing the guy on the last lap, helping him. And Darrell's narrating. He says, he's not really pushing him. He's just bumping him, and bumping's all right. There's nothing wrong with bumping the guy, right? So I put a thing out there. Well, see here, Darrell's been raising hell for 20 years about that, or 30 years, and here he is. Now he's hypocritical because he said it's okay on the Cars movie to do that. And Darrell had some kind of smart aleck remark to it too, right? In fact, I tell you another part of that story. I relayed that story on the Dale Jr. download 2 or 3 years ago when I was on it. And it was so funny. I called Darrell that night and I was telling him about that story. And here's the neat part, man. As we got to talking about it, Darrell went back to the moment, Charlie. He went back to that moment. And I'm telling you, he got all pissed off again, right there on the friggin' telephone with me talking about that. He was all it was the weirdest thing, man. It was like he's back in the moment. And I'm like, you know what? Race car drivers, they're just a different breed because we didn't have as it turned out, we didn't have a logical conversation because he got back in the moment and got all pissed off again because he thought he had a victory robbed from him. Right? I thought, to me, that whole story, that part right there was the coolest part of that whole story, and that was just like what 2-3 years ago, right? So, they talk about race car drivers have an elephant memory, and that is true on stuff. We can't remember what we ate for breakfast, but we can remember lap 178 at New Hampshire when that friggin' Earnhardt hit me in turn 3. It cost me a lap, right? It's just the way it works with drivers.
When did that rule change? It seems like that. I mean, that it's not illegal now, right? Because obviously Martin Truex Jr. was pushing Christopher Bell at the end of the race just the other day. I know that wasn't a gas issue.
No, if the rule was already in place then, the rule hasn't changed. It's just if you get caught doing it or not. Okay,
Okay,
you cannot have. I forget how it's worded, but you got to come across start finish line under your own power. That's
gotcha.
and lead it up to it. So when Harry he come across the finish line, hell, he was 10 car lengths away from me. You know what I mean?
Okay, so did Harry though? Did he actually run out of gas
Oh
as
yeah.
he was?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it was just funny because you could see it. It happened 2 or 3 times when I get against him and bump him and stuff. And then the thing I could see black smoke rolling out. It would grab a little bit of gas and the thing would fire up and black smoke and it would fire up and take off, But it was just it wasn't in those like right now, it seems like when these cars run out of fuel now, they're out. The way the pickups are that picks the fuel up in the fuel cell, it's like they got them fixed down, engineered to where it picks every ounce up. You're picking up full fuel, and then when it gets empty, it's flat empty, just like that. In those days, you would have fuel in the thing, and you might have, a quarter of a gallon or a pint or 2 pints or whatever still in the fuel cell, but the pickup wouldn't pick it all up at one time, and the way it sloshes around and the banking and all that, the pickup might get uncovered and have no fuel. And if you wiggle the car a little bit, fuel would run over in the fuel cell, and the pickup would pick the fuel up, and the motor would fire back up. Okay, so that's how it's a little bit different now than it was in those days with these cars.
Yeah, how do you think it happens nowadays though? And did they not it seems like to me they didn't relay it to Blaney because again, so I'm listening to the end of the race on the radio, but when it ends, they go to all the guys, the big storylines, the top 5 guys, and it seemed like at the time Blaney was very shocked that he ran out of fuel. Like he didn't even know it was coming.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. You know, they weren't in a fuel saving mode. I mean, it didn't seem like from watching the race. I mean, you don't know internally on another radio channel what they're doing or talking about, but there was never any indication from him as a driver that he's trying to save fuel, and we never heard any relays to him about that. So that told me they weren't concerned about fuel. Okay, so then that in turn tells me there was a bad miscalculation somewhere, right? Either either somebody put a number down wrong or the fuel cell, all the fuel in the can didn't get put in or whatever the deal was. It wasn't as much fuel in that fuel cell as the team thought was in it, right? It's as simple as that. Or the other thing could be something malfunctioned inside of the fuel cell, the pickup. But that's very rare, Charlie. It's very rare that could happen, but it could happen. That could have happened. It could have been a failure inside of the fuel cell. I don't know. I'm sure they knew 8 o'clock Monday morning, that crew chief knew what he did. Hell, he probably knew before he left the racetrack what happened, right? But whether they let us know or not, who knows?
Yeah, what'd you think of the contact between the Kyles, Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch, and whose fault was it? Who wrecked who, or is it just rubbing his racing? You know, I
Man,
put a couple clips out because I was there. I was there for when Kyle Busch did his quick media interview, and he
yeah.
was obviously mad about it. And then I put on one of the headlines, you know, Kyle Larson wrecks Kyle Busch. Now, clearly Kyle Larson could still race. Kyle Busch was wrecked out of the race, but then everybody was giving me crap about who
Yeah.
actually wrecked who. So give me your opinion.
Yeah, man. It's social media fun. It
It is
really
it
is.
is fun.
It really is, dude. I look at some of the pushback on some of our conversations and people
Mhm.
comments we get, and I kind of get, I kind of get humored. But you know, honestly, you want to know the honest deal? That was two guys that got a little irritated with one another in a matter of 2 seconds, right? And when you do that on the racetrack, you get irritated with the guy you're racing against for 2 or 3 seconds. Most of the time, 90% of the time, you'll get, you'll get away from each other. And 7 to 10 seconds later, that's not even that. What just happens? Not even in your mind anymore. And that's the perfect criteria. This is the perfect situation for what I'm telling you about this 2 second pissed off at each other. It happens, and I mean, if you do a race, man, it'll happen to you a dozen times in a race. It happens to everybody, but when it happened to those guys, that 2 second of pissed off at each other resulted in both of them wrecking. Right. So what happens? Kyle is trying to get by Kyle. Okay, you figure out which one. Kyle's trying to get by Kyle. All right. So Larson's on the inside. And he'd been trying for a while. They come down the straightaway, and Bush kind of comes down the racetrack a little bit. He's trying to hold him back. What they got? 2 laps to go, or whatever it is before the interval, or whatever it is
It was
to
stage 2, right?
stage two. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, to get those all important points. Well, so when he does that, then Kyle moves just a little bit up. Well, they kind of touch, right? So now you're starting that 2 second pissed off area, right? One guy's shoved down, the other guy shoved up a little bit, just on the straightaway, trying to show their dominance. And Bush is like, "You ain't gonna get by me." Larson's like, "I'm gonna get by you," right? And they kind of touch and they hit. Well, they get away, and then they just barely do that. Well, then they get away from one another. A second later, they hit each other pretty good. And now we're getting it right at the end of the straightaway. We're getting ready to set our arc up into the turn, right? So when they hit each other pretty good, then they separate by 5 or 6 inches, and they go into turn one with Bush really at this point holding Larson down. I mean, he holds him to the bottom, right? And Larson's like, "I'm going in this turn the same rate of speed I always go." But the problem is with Bush right against him like that, there is no side force on that car whatsoever. So Larson's going to get loose. And when he gets loose, they touch. And of course, Bush, they both spin, but Bush gets taken out of the race. And that's really the whole thing in a nutshell, right? If they could have got apart from one another by 2 feet, just if one of them could have moved 2 feet out or in at that 1.5 second mark of the pissed offness, right? That wreck wouldn't have happened. And the next lap, neither one of those guys would have been thinking about what just transpired before. But it's a classic 2 second pissed off deal that happens in racing every week, every race with everybody. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. That's the best way I know how to explain it because that's all it was to it. Plain and
Mhm.
simple. Plain and simple.
All right, speaking of one of those Kyles, Kyle Larson with I think the worst kept secret in NASCAR was that Kyle Larson was going to get this waiver. And look, I watched the Elton Sawyer press conference on
Yeah.
Zoom the other day, and I thought he explained it very well, and it made a lot of sense. Look, it's at the end of the day about the fans. I mean, and the
Right.
fans for the last 10 races of the season, they want to see Kyle Larson get a shot for the championship. I do though think because NASCAR to me is more savvy about this nowadays with promotion. You can go back to the fight between Stenhouse and Kyle Busch. I think NASCAR milked this for a nice 10 days of publicity. What do you think? And it
Man,
worked. work.
Yeah. Charlie, I don't know. Honestly, I'll be completely honest with you. I've had those same thoughts. I've read it, and I'm like, no, they certainly didn't do this, did they? Right? What it goes back to is, to start with, we all knew what was going to happen, right? He's going to run both races. Well, the rain came, and of course that screwed everything up. They, in my mind, knowing all the parties involved, I'm like, they have to have insurances. Hendrick Motorsports is bound to have assurances that, this is going to work, this is going to be okay, right? That was always in my mind. And then when it's all over with, and NASCAR puts out the deal last week after the race, and and Larson doesn't have any playoff points. I'm like, now what's going on here, right? Is this for media hype or? And then we read and hear that we've got two factions in NASCAR that are fighting with one another about whether to waive the deal or not for Larson. And I'm like, well, I don't know what's true. All right, is it? Did they have? All right, the questions are: did they have the assurances? Did Hendrick have the assurances beforehand that he would get the waiver? All right, if he did or he didn't. Well, then if he didn't, you know, then NASCAR is like, well, we haven't officially done that, and there's like two or three people in charge that say we ain't gonna give him one because he chose the Indy 500 over the World 600. Then you got two or three other people in NASCAR saying, yeah, but it's great for our sport. It's great for racing overall. Is that really what went on? Okay, or is it, we're going to give them the waiver all along, but let's get some hype over it for a couple weeks. Well, Charlie, the problem with that angle, the problem is we had so much negative hype, right? It was negative hype over that deal. I mean, but then you got the thing to always keep in mind with NASCAR, dude. You always keep this in mind. I don't care what's going on and who's running it. You always go back to Bill France Sr., right? And his mantra. I mean, his mantra was publicity. I don't care if it's good publicity or bad publicity, as long as we get publicity, right? Now, again, granted, different era, is back before cell phones and computers and all that stuff, but that was his take. The more publicity we get. And I don't know if maybe some of that is still, it's hard to say. I'm going to tell you something. NASCAR is a very, very, very sophisticated organization, Charlie. They're a lot more sophisticated, I think, than they get credit for, right? So if you look at it if you look at it in that standpoint, maybe they were just milking it for a couple of weeks. They knew what they were going to do. Maybe that is the case. I don't know, but with the TV deal, I mean, you don't sell what $8 billion package to TV networks and not have some level of high level of sophistication in your organization. You know that it just doesn't happen, right? So I'm like you, Charlie, and everybody else. I'm left with, man. There's like three scenarios could have happened here, and I honestly don't know. And I that makes me mad because I normally have enough inside information, or not inside information. I have enough people I can talk to and all, and just kind of read between the lines and figure this stuff out. Can't figure this one out. I cannot figure this one out. I just don't know at this point. I will figure it out before this Rick Mast show ends in the next decade or two. I'll have it figured out, and when I do, I'll let you know.
Yeah, it did seem like some people. I think everybody thought Kyle Larson would get the waiver, but for example, at that Kenny Wallace live show, Bubba Wallace was there, and Kenny asked him, and Bubba Wallace basically said he made a choice. He said that Kyle Larson made a choice once he knew the weather was bad. And that, look, you basically have to leave once there's going to be a long delay. You'd have to leave at that point to make the Coke 600 on time. That Kyle Larson made a choice, and he, for that day, chose the Indy 500 over the Coke 600. Now, I would do the same personally, but that's not an unfair argument.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's not. It's not. I mean, I had those thoughts that Sunday watching all these races. Right. I'm like, when he elected to stay up there, I'm like, well, man, you kind of putting the Indy 500 over this NASCAR race, right? I mean, this is your bread and butter. I mean, you were down and out 3 or 4 years ago whenever all you had your trouble. and Mr. Hendrick give you the shot, and NASCAR is giving you what you've got now, you know. And I'm like, nah, no, this is bigger than that. This is bigger. You know, the fan, like I remember when Tony, the first year, well, when Tony Stewart did the deal, and Tony flew in on the helicopter at Charlotte, right? And we were all there. This right before the race started. Here comes, of course, it's Humpy Wheeler and the big show and all that. But here comes Tony helicoptering in right there on the front stretch, right, or the grassy area. And I'm telling you, Charlie, the grandstands, it was like Earnhardt winning, wherever Earnhardt won it. If Earnhardt would win at Charlotte, that's the way it was, man. You'd be on the Richter scale. You could pick it up on the Richter scale of an earthquake from the fans winning or from Earnhardt winning. That's the way, and that's the way it was when Tony helicoptered in. When that helicopter come hovering and started coming down and hit the ground, and he got out of that helicopter, 100 and however in those days, 150,000 people or 30 or whatever it was. I'm telling you right now, everybody was up hooping and hollering, right, and watching this happen. So it's a real big, it's a big ass deal. It was a big deal, and that's when I realized what this double thing was. I'm like, this is a cool deal, man. This is good. This is good for a sport. All right. So I always have that in my mind when these guys do pull these doubles. And the deal with Kyle was, you know, they wanted that helicopter baby to come in and land with Kyle Larson. And they wanted our NASCAR fans to see that and experience it, you know, enjoy it. Well, the rain kept that from happening. All right. So now you got to rethink about everything. But you know, and if Kyle hadn't have sped, if he hadn't sped on pit road at Indy, who knows what would have happened? I mean, this dude had a shot. He had a legitimate shot to win that friggin' race, man. Kyle Larson, a rookie at Indy 500, winning. My Lord have mercy. And they already had plans in place. If he won the race, no rain, they still had plans in place, like all the ceremonies and stuff. And I don't know what those plans are. Maybe delayed starting of 600 a little bit. Maybe him delaying getting there a little bit. I don't know what those plans are. That probably figures into this overall decision. But in my mind, you know, yeah, he that was choosing. And I keep saying Kyle. I shouldn't say that. I don't know that he had much choice or say in this matter. I got an idea he was doing what he was told. And you know, if you're a driver doing what you're told, then you know chips fall where they fall. But the good that it brought to motorsports in general, I think, outweighed all the negative stuff that happened. That's just my point. And the deal with Bubba, poor old Bubba, he's always on the friggin' defense, right? You know, and he finally had something he could get on the offense about, right? So he put it out there. I kind of chuckled when he said that because he had a valid point. That's a very valid point, you know, very valid. And but I thought, damn, Bubba, you're always on the defensive on everything all the time. You finally get to go on the offense about something. So good for you, dude. Good for you.
Love it. All right. So you put out a video last week about the Stewart Haas racing situation. And I think maybe you and I can have a nice little debate about this because I agree with most of what you said, which is, look, this doesn't mean that NASCAR is in this terrible spot. And I think personally, I think the on track, what's going on, the racing right now is amazing. And everything we've talked about, all of the off track, go from the fight to the Stewart Haas discussion. That was a big storyline. Carl Edwards did his press conference. That was a big storyline. Then the Kyle Larson waiver. There's a lot of interesting things happening with NASCAR. So from that standpoint, I think it's great. However, I do think from a team standpoint, what happened with Stewart Haas Racing is showing you, look, I think everybody agrees there's a lot of money in NASCAR. But what the teams are complaining about, Jeff Gordon, Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, you've heard a lot about it's hard for these teams to make money year to year. Now, the price of the charter is a different story. But here's where I'm just, as a sports guy who I've worked in sports for 20 years, all of these teams, when you buy them, they just go up and up and up. It's arguably the best investment you could ever make is buying a sports franchise. It does seem like in NASCAR that it's really hard to turn a profit. And so somebody like Tony Stewart and Gene Haas, are they saying, you know, I can put my money elsewhere? I'm kind of not at the track every week anyway. It does seem like to me that NASCAR needs to make it healthier for the teams. that does seem like it's not just noise because everybody's
Right.
talking about this.
Right. You know, Charlie, one of my dear friends in life is a guy named Mark Sauer, Sauer. Mark Sauer, they were his family owned Duke's Mayonnaise. Duke's Mayonnaise was the last sponsor I had in Cup racing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I ended my career with those guys. And he's probably one of the smartest dudes intellectually. He's in the top 5 of intellectual guys that I've known in my life. And he became a fan of the sport in the late '90s, and that's kind of how they got into the sponsorship role. Uh, in fact, Duke's Kenny drove for them just a little bit. You know, he'll remember that. But he always harped on me about how our model was wrong. He always fussed about our business model, NASCAR business model, and he always harped on the big elephant or gorilla in the room, which is the NFL. You know, I admit it, the NFL's got everybody covered. You know, they got the biggest deal, the best model, the whole deal. And Mark always was on that kick about it. And I hadn't really ever given it a lot of consideration because basically we're all private contractors. NASCAR is an organization and we're all private contractors. Like as a driver, you know, you're contracted with the team where you're still responsible to get there and get back to your lodging, you know, your own insurance and all that stuff. It's not like and when it's all said and done, you get no retirement, you know, there's no revenue sharing, there's nothing for a driver when he retires, right? Like all the other sports get, because you're an independent contractor. Same way with the teams, you're independent, right? So if we let's follow the history, let's take a moment by moment and follow the history. In the '90s, when this thing was exploding so much, all of a sudden we went from maybe 15 good sponsors in our sport till the whole field just about had Fortune 500 companies sponsoring these cars. So you have a field that starts 43 cars, right? And you'd probably have 40 at that time. You had 40 pretty well funded teams, right? For a period of time. Well, what happened? You had 40, so you start 43 cars. Then now you've got 48 cars at the racetrack trying to qualify, right? And I don't care who you are or what you do, somebody's going to falter on a qualifying lap sometime. Somebody's going to hit something. I don't care who you are that gives you a good qualifying lap, right? The King got ousted at Richmond, and this is earlier than that, but the King got ousted one time at Richmond. Darrell Waltrip got ousted at Charlotte Motor Speedway, right? And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back on, you know, we got to do something about this because you've got a Fortune 500 company signed up for 36 races or whatever it be, however many races, you got to sign up for 36 races and you get millions of dollars from them. You have everything planned. You've got your corporate, your CEO, you got everybody in the company going to Charlotte Motor Speedway to sit in a suite that you just spent $100,000 on, and everybody gets in there. You got customers in there. You've got, you know, everything revolves around this sponsorship. You start the race, and your car's not in the show. It's not even in the race. You're like, what the hell am I doing this for? Where's my money being spent? That was a big deal back then, Charlie. And so that's how the provisional deal was born, right? We give provisionals. We take I don't know the numbers. Say we qualify 38 cars, and then that would give you 5 cars to get in on provisional points and one champion. I always said the one nice. If you were a champion, you had a provisional, right? So that was really the prelude to this thought process of changing the model a little bit that led to today's charter system, right? Two things about the charter system. You're an owner when you get out of the sport, and you've heard this many times. The value you have is whatever the building you've got and however many welders and sheet metal breaks is in there, right? It's auction sale stuff. You don't have no value. So the charter system was set in place to help or fix that, and also guarantee that that team that's got that sponsor is going to be in the race. If you sponsor this team because they've got a charter, you don't have to worry about missing races. Your name is going to be out there at every race, right? So that's the two things that that the charter thing did. Now, what I pointed out last week was this is the first time, and we heard stuff about BJ McLeod and how much that charter so forth, but we don't really know. But this is really the first bona fide, I'm gonna call it bona fide example of what the charter really means for an owner when he wants to get out. Do I have value, right? And until we know the numbers, we won't be able to say that. I mean, we're hearing about the one charter's already gone to what's the name, but until we hear the
Front row.
numbers, yeah, front row, and until we know the numbers, then we won't know, what that is. I think Kenny even picked up on that. As an interesting point to bring up. So, but back to your deal, Charlie. Our model, man, our model, and until we start getting, well, I don't know, dude. I mean, 8 billion is a big number for a TV package, and these guys, and I fully believe them. I fully believe Jeff Gordon and those guys when they say we didn't make money, we're not making money. I fully believe that. All the other sports owners, everyone, like you just said, man, that you buy a team for $1 billion in 3 years, it's worth $4 billion, and all you've done is sit there and watch the game and sold hot dogs each week. Our sport is not like that. It's a different model, and you're trying to take the dollars that you have available and make the thing successful. And that's this deal right now that NASCAR and the owners are in the middle of over the charter deal. How much? I mean, over the TV deal, how much of that cut do we get? The I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but the owners want a bigger chunk of that. Well, NASCAR I think was the lowest. Where they get like 10% of it. The rest goes to the owners and the tracks. So where that money has to come away from to me is the tracks. You know what I mean? If NASCAR's only getting 10% of the deal, then it would have to come from the tracks. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not into negotiations. I know a little bit about it, but I know enough to know that I should keep my mouth shut because I don't know enough about it. Okay, because they are deliberating. And again, unless we could come up with a different model, Charlie, to your point, it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, and what you said about the sponsors, I think is really interesting, but I thought about it also from a fan standpoint, which kind of gets back to the Kyle Larson waiver situation, but you probably heard this in the NBA the last couple of years. This whole load management deal in the NBA became a huge problem because you had nationally televised games, and back in the day, the San Antonio Spurs would sit like Tim Duncan and Kawhi Leonard, same game, national TV game. It might be a Lakers game or back in the day, wherever LeBron was playing. And he was sitting the game out. And so that was bad for television, which is bad for revenue. But also, your fans are your customers.
Right.
And so I think about this in the same lens. If my kid's favorite driver is Chase Elliott and we buy a ticket and hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands after travel and hotels, and he's
Right.
not racing, like
Right.
the stories you brought up, I can't imagine if my favorite driver back in the day was Richard Petty or whoever, and I have that whole weekend blocked out, RV going, and Richard Petty is not in the freaking race. I'm
Yeah.
pissed if I'm a
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah, and that's what it goes back to. Even back in the early days, dude, they called it deal money, right? The tracks. I mean, we're talking about 60s, 70s. These cut tracks would pay deal money to make sure that driver showed up, right?
Mhm.
Whether it be a Bobby Allison or a Richard Petty, those guys would get what they call deal money to show up. Yeah, and then that, and we would even get it late model sports back in the late 70s, early 80s before the Busch Series was started. I'd go to Southside Speedway or South Boston Speedway when the race is over. The promoter would come give me $200 or $250 in cash, and it's called deal money. Thank you for showing up over and above the purse money because he wanted those promoters wanted you there, and that's what we always called it. When the Busch Series started, he took all those late model guys and put them together. Started the Busch Grand National Series. They started a program called the Winner's Circle, right? And it's basically if you want to race, then you signed a contract that you would show up at every race next year, right? But it was good money. It was like in those days, I forget the number, maybe $2,500, which is a big number in those days, that you were guaranteed to show up, right? So that still all that goes to your what you're talking about. These promoters and the fans. We want Rick Mast there at South Boston Speedway on March 14th, right? And we're going to go watch Rick Mast, and promoters like, Okay, I got to make sure Rick Mast is here, right? So we pay him deal money, or as NASCAR did, the winner's circle, and that goes right back to what you're talking about. I mean, yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It's for the fans, and uh, I don't know. It's funny how this stuff evolves over the years, but you're still the same crap. You know, it's all still the same thing. You're trying to do the same thing, man.
All right. How about our weekly installment, our weekly segment of what is pissing off Rick Mast this week?
Well, I don't know if it's this week, but this morning I read an article. Charlie, 1977. I was in my second year of college. I did a 2-year college deal, right? Business administration deal, and I wrote a term paper on electric cars, right? Now, then I also in those 2 years we had a computer class. I took a computer class, and you know what the computer class was? I remember it. It's how many bits does it take to make how many bits does it take to make a byte? That's what the computer class was. There were no Windows. There were no cell phones. It was nothing, right? It's just how many bits it took to make a byte. And that's what your computer system, the memory is built off on. And I don't remember anything else about the class other than I did pass it, right? But very, 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 very way back in historic learning of any technology, dude. So here we come, what, 50 years later, almost 50 years later. In my term paper, the end of my term paper, the main theme was the batteries aren't worth a damn, right? Electric vehicles is a great in theory, but the batteries don't work. That was the theme of my term paper. 50 years later, all right, somebody decides in the government or whoever they're going to push electric vehicles on America. Well, America revolted, right? The last 6 months, and that thing's kind of put off to the side now. Well, what's the problem with electric cars today, 50 years later? The damn battery still ain't no good, Charlie. Now, how can we, as a society, go through the developments of all the tech? You think about the 70s, the technology that we've developed since 1970, right? On everything, man. And younger folks don't even know what I'm talking about. We talk about a cell phone or a computer, right? Or just anything. The advances we made. We can't make a damn battery that would run more than 200 miles down the road without stopping for an hour and charging it. It's just, I'm like, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a scientist and I'm not smart enough to be one. But if I was, I'd have taken on batteries as a kid out of engineering school or science school and figured out how to make $1 zillion making a battery that worked. They just don't, it's not there. It's just not there. So the electric vehicle is never, ever going to be prominent until we have a battery that won't let us down in the middle of the damn road at 250 miles because I got the wipers running and the air conditioner. I'm supposed to go 300 miles, right? That's what they told me. This car goes 300 miles. Well, they forgot to tell you can't run the wipers and the air conditioner because you only go 250 if you do that. So now you broke down waiting on a tow truck. I don't know and so many people buy into it, and you got the people spouting that stuff up there, and they won't just be truthful with you. Just be truthful with us. Golly, bum.
It's crazy too, just talking about technology and computers. 'Cause we had this conversation kind of the other day on the radio. I'm 42, just turned. We have a guy on our show who's like 24. And we were talking about the evolution of cell phones, how I didn't grow up with a cell phone, didn't get one until college. We were talking about, remember 1-800-COLLECT?
Yeah,
Remember phone cards?
yeah.
I mean, this guy who's
Oh, yeah,
24 had
yeah.
no idea what that was.
I'd already
And then you
forgotten
talk
about
about, right.
them.
And then you talk about, you're a generation ahead of me and you're talking about computers. And I remember, so let's say we got a computer 35 years ago at our house. We got an Apple IIc computer with the floppy disks. We would play Mario Brothers and whatnot, print shop. We'd print out greeting cards and banners and whatnot. And I remember how long everything took. And the printer would work and you'd hear the noise as it's printing, the terrible pixelated, and now everything looks just immaculate and perfect. But it's just crazy because now I'm on this laptop that I'm doing this show on all the time. I do all my work from this laptop. If I press a button, and that browser doesn't come up in 1 second, I'm pissed.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if it takes me 3
yeah,
seconds, I'm
yeah,
like, "What the hell is going on?" If it doesn't happen instantaneously. Back in the day, we used to wait for multiple minutes for anything to happen.
yeah. Remember the dial-up deal? Ding
Yeah.
dong. You had to wait on that thing. Golly, bum.
AOL.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The dial-up thing, dude. Last night I saw a thing last night on TV. They're talking about this tribe in, and I shouldn't
Yes.
say which country. I don't know if you saw this or not.
The Elon Musk Starlink
The
deal.
Elon Musk, yeah, the Starlink deal, where he
Yep.
gave this tribe and what's
Mhm.
happened to them since then.
Mhm.
Oh man, I'm like, they become porn addicts. I mean, this is like National Geographic people used to watch the
Yeah.
they don't know a light bulb from the moon, right? And he comes in there with this technology and shows them this thing, and they all just and it shows how down this group of people went. And I'm like, goodness gracious, a life of microcosm. I mean, it's good stuff and it's bad stuff with all this crap. And if it wasn't for this, Charlie, I wouldn't know Charlie, right?
That's
And
true.
people watching this wouldn't even be listening to Rick Mass, the old bull crap with Harry Gant pushing and Darrell being mad and all that. We wouldn't have all this. So it's a good thing. I've said a million times, dude. I've said it 100,000 times. If this stuff would have been available in the '90s when I was racing, half of us would be fired. Like I told you before, it started this deal. You'd be fired. It'd be fights every week. It's just I just look back. I look back at our era, and if this stuff would have been there, I'm like, man, I don't know. I can't even imagine what would have come out of it. I just don't know because I know the personalities involved in our sport. A lot of the guys wouldn't even mess with it, right? That's just your personality. Like like Rusty, he still won't mess with it much, right? I mean, you got two brothers so far on opposite spectrums with Kenny and Rusty Wallace, right? Kenny's out there 100%, and everybody knows how many hairs he's got on his eyebrows today, And with Rusty, you don't really know if Rusty's still alive or is he dead or what's he doing. So some of the guys have been like that, but man, it would have been wild. It would have been absolutely wild.
All right, we got story time. You've already told some great ones. The Harry Gant Darrell Waltrip. You pushing Harry Gant back in the day. We got Sonoma coming up. So anything come to mind for story time
Oh gosh, Sonoma.
or anything? It can be anything.
Yeah, let's see the Wine Valley. My guys.
Are you a wine guy?
No, I'm not.
No.
I'm not.
Beer guy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
All my family is. I just can't get into the wine, dude. Skinner's tried to get me into the wine, Mike and Angie, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and my wife, and I just can't do it. I don't know why. We went to Sears Point one time with the Alcatraz,
Oh,
and it was some deal. The year I drove for Remington, we actually floated the Remington race car, show car, across the bay to Alcatraz and took pictures. Dale Jarrett was there with us, and they were giving us a tour. And anyhow, they put me and Dale in one of those little cells, and they locked the door. All of a sudden, the door gets locked. And I'm gonna tell you, Dale got mad. He said, "Unlock this door right now." I don't know what the deal was. He wanted out of there. But anyhow, that was a neat deal. We did one time, Charlie. We did a deal, and this again was the Remington show car. We started on the northern end of the Golden Gate Bridge. All right. I'm driving my show car south towards San Francisco. There were probably 25 other, or maybe even 30 show cars, each representing their sponsor, their team. We had CHP, which is California Highway Patrol. They were leading us on the motorcycles. They were behind us. We started on the north end of that bridge. We drove all the way across that bridge, right down into San Francisco, right? And I remember, and each one of us had a reporter riding with us. So I had a reporter sitting in the floorboard of this show car, right? And he's riding along. I don't know that all the guys did. I know I had a reporter with me. I do know that. And so we go downtown San Francisco, dude. And I'm looking up, and all these suit and ties they're lined on the street. This is not your typical fan with the race attire and stuff. These are businessmen and people lined on the streets of San Francisco, and we're going through, and these people are waving and cheering at us, right? And this reporter dude, finally, We come around where I forget. We end up somewhere downtown. I don't know where the hell we're at, but anyhow, we end up. I cut the engine off, and this guy is looking at me. He says, "Rick," I said, "Yeah." "Do you know where you're at?" I said, "Well, yeah, San Francisco." He said, "No, do you not realize where you're at?" And I said, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. I said, "Man, I'm in San Francisco is all I know." He says, "Rick, you're in downtown San Francisco in the business district." I'm like, "Okay, that's where I'm at." He says, "You don't get it, do you?" I said, "Dude, what are you talking about? Did you see all these three-piece suit businessmen out here lining these streets cheering you guys?" I said, "Yeah, I saw that." He said, "Does that not strike you as?" He said, "Does that not strike you as strange?" I said, "No, it's not strange." I said, "It's like this everywhere we go." He said, and he's from there, right? He says, "I've never seen anything like this." He said, "I had no idea this sport reached or had the finger." He said, "I had no idea this sport has the fingers that it has, reaching downtown San Francisco business district with businessmen and women. I'm sorry, and women also out there cheering for you guys, the fans." I'm like, "Well, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Everywhere we go, it's like this right now. It's ridiculous, right? It's that popular." But this reporter that lived there, and evidently he didn't know much about our sport either, right? He was totally, totally, totally blown away that all these people that he wouldn't think would be fan are friggin' NASCAR fans. And that was part of that goes back to, the explosion of our sport and how it got so popular by the end of the year 2000, right? That was all part of it. It was weird, dude. It was weird, very weird, but it was
That's funny.
cool.
Yeah. As you're telling that, I'm just thinking, you're in San Francisco, you're in a neighborhood you didn't think. I thought the ending of that story was going to be you're in
Different,
some gay district.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, there was that's a, and I will say this. I don't when I tell that story, I never tell it publicly. But the thing that got me, I saw three-piece suit or three-piece suit guys, businessmen, walking down the street, holding hands and hugging and stuff. And I remember seeing that. I've never saw that openly before, I guess. And I saw that. I'm like, "Oh, okay. This is the deal out here." You read about it, hear about it, like, "Well, that's cool. These guys living their life the way they want to live it." And I'm always for that. I'm not gay, but I'm just saying I love for people to live their own life the way they want to live it, dude.
For
As long as
sure.
you don't hurt me, yeah, I don't give a damn what you do.
Agreed.
More
All
power
right.
to you.
Let's end on this because I just had a great vacation to Sea Island, Georgia. Had never
Sweet.
been there. Went with my whole wife's side of the family. It was fantastic. So Rick Mast, what's the best vacation you've ever taken in your life?
You know what? We've taken a bunch. I've taken them all over the country and all over the world, right? But we went, my daughters drove me and my wife to CMA Fest in Nashville 4 years ago for a week of music, drinking, debauchery, right? And it was absolutely that was. And I tell people I had more fun that week, I think, than anything I ever did on a vacation type deal, right? It was just, I don't know. You got to like country music, or you got to like music. You don't really have to like country music. You just got to like music. But here's what you got to like to enjoy that. You've got to like and love happy people because that was the happiest bunch of friggin' people. And you couldn't walk, you couldn't move downtown Nashville, right? During CMA Fest. If you haven't been, you need to do it because everybody's happy. You walk from bar to bar to bar. There's some artists in there singing and playing, right? You go in there and you buy a beer or not, and you sit there and listen to an up and coming artist play, or you'll run across famous artists that been there playing, right? And it was, I don't know, it was just happy, happy, happy people. Funnest time I believe I ever had. We got to talk about S.J. McDonald sometime. Little girl grew up, well, 1 mile from me, the way the crow flies. She's been in Nashville for a number of years. Just signed her contract a month ago. We'll talk about her in an upcoming episode sometime. We're all pulling for her. Hope she makes it big.
Very cool. On that note, this past week at St. Louis, they have this Confluence Music Festival. So around the
Yeah.
the track, I mean, they had what they have Dirk Bentley, Riley Green. I'm not a huge country fan, but obviously I've heard of Dirk Bentley. They had Ludacris and then Adam Wainwright, who's from Georgia.
Right. Right.
and the Cardinals pitcher is now trying to be a country music star. So he played as well, and
Yeah.
I stayed for the first song of him, and I mean he has a 7-piece band. It
Yeah.
sounded good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, man. I'm gonna tell you something. If you go to, I guess it all started with Woodstock. You ever heard of Woodstock, Charlie?
Oh yeah. Well,
Okay.
and how about this? So I remember Woodstock 2, which was, now I didn't go to it, but 1994, that was a big deal. It was what, the 25th anniversary, and they had that double CD that I had back in the day,
Oh
and all the
man. Oh
mud
man.
from Woodstock 2.
Oh man. And then the big one they have in Tennessee or wherever it is now, Bonnaroo, every
Yeah.
year. And it doesn't have to be one genre. What I've noticed on these big events, it doesn't have to be one genre. You can mix in blues, you mix in country rock, even rap. I've seen now a lot of these venues are starting to mix rap in with this stuff, with country stuff and all that. And it's just people going and having a good time, man. Just being happy and having a good time. And just, with other people of like mind and just love music and love having happy people around them. And that's what I love, do. Happy people.
Yes, sir. And I like to think that we're both two happy people here on the Rick Mass Show. And I
Oh
also want
yeah.
to throw it out to the listeners and viewers. If you have any questions for Rick, put them in the comments, and we'll try to get a couple questions
Yeah.
each week if we have some good ones for
Yeah.
next week's episode. So, Rick, this was fun, man. We'll get back to our every week schedule next week, and have a good one, man.
Toodaloo, guys. Peace out.